This is the World Organic News for the week ending 30th of January 2017. John Moore reporting. This week's show marks the 1 year anniversary of the podcast. To those of you who have been with us from the beginning, many thanks. And to those of you who have joined us on the way, also many thanks. It is a gratifying thing to see stats improve over the year. It is also motivating, so once again, thanks to all my listeners. This week we start with a post from Permie Flix, which seems appropriate for the 1 year anniversary. It's entitled, Bacteria Surf the Fungal Web. Regular listeners will know my obsession with the fungal webs beneath forest communities and a need to preserve these structures from clear felling and ploughs. This video from the Scientific America blog shows actual bacteria travelling along the fungal superhighways. The video is only 1 minute 31 seconds long, but seeing the bacteria moving along these fungal pathways will change the way you see the world forever. So much goes on underground, out of sight and until recently out of mind. We are just scratching the surface of this world, pun intended. Have a look and change your life. Link is in the show notes. In contrast to this system of balance and flow comes a post from the blog Joy of Reading, entitled, Endless Economic Growth. Quote, the Western monopoly capitalist paradigm that allows big money to chase after more of the profit of the few, using Mother Earth as a disposable factor of production, is neither sustainable nor logical, based on modern science and natural law. End quote. I'll admit this sounds a little Malthusian, but I can live with that. The point is well made. Converting nature into not so much pieces of paper with an agreed value of exchange, but now into arrangements of electrons to do the same job, does seem like a fool's errand. Many people no longer live in poverty as a result of this system, but it is possible to, and I would argue, their poverty was a result of the system in the first place. There is change afoot. Quote, endless economic growth based on finite natural resources is finished. It is a mind-centered egotistical fantasy to thrive at the expense of other nations. The death of the paradigm has already begun. End quote. To follow on from this blog, the Food Geographer brings us a call to action. Let's all build an environmental mindset. Quote, I have found myself in a situation that I think many people are in, caring about the environment but feeling paralysed by the enormity of the task at hand and how little they feel in comparison. End quote. This sums up our dilemma succinctly. The food biographer provides solutions. Quote, I think what we need is a mindset shift, which will then lead to an action shift. Here are my simple suggestions. Remember that, unless you are the next Gandhi, you alone cannot change the entire world. End quote. So we each do a little. In doing so, we discover the next Seymour, Mollison or Fukuoka. The Food Geographer suggests skills we could learn, improve on and or pass on to others. Quote, 1. Food growing. Volunteer at an urban farm. 2. Vegetarian cooking. Ask someone to teach you. 3. How to make your home more sustainable. Turn your apartment into a garden. 4. Recycling schemes in your area. Contact your local council or support Hubbub's new coffee cup campaign. Air pollution. Plant more trees, sign a campaign every week. Wildlife conservation, vertical farming, or identifying birdsong to help conservation. Improving public transport and biking. Write a letter to your government rep. 8. Young people in education. Learn how to teach or host workshops at school. End quote. Now you could call this the noble eightfold path to save ourselves and our communities. Let's examine each of these in turn. 1. Food growing. My ebook on No Dig Gardening is a great starting point. Even though self-praise is faint praise, I am quite proud of it. There's a link in the show notes. We can all grow some food and surprisingly large amounts of it in small areas. Local urban and community gardens and farms are also ways into this wonderful activity. 2. Vegetarian cooking. You can ask someone or a simple Google search will help if you are driven in this direction. 3. A sustainable home is possible. Even a more sustainable home is a good start. Michael Mobbs in Sydney, New South Wales, Australia, has done it and will show you how. There's a link in the show notes there too. He lives off-grid in an inner suburban terrace house, generates his own energy and much of his own food, so it really is doable. 4. Recycling. This is so 1970s I shouldn't even have to mention it. Maybe a look at the zero waste movement might help. 5. Air pollution. All pollution, in fact, is a problem. Think of Bill Mollison's quote, "Waste is a resource in the wrong place." Starting there can and will change the world dramatically. 6. Wildlife conservation is as much a given as recycling, I'd have thought, but to that we can add the specialisation of pollinator protection. No bees, little food variation. Pineapples, wheat, rice and potatoes. Not much of a diet, so this is an area where we can all make a large difference. 7. Public transport, push bikes and so on, as well as the move to electric vehicles helps, provided the electricity comes from a green source. This will also help with number 5, air pollution. 8. Youth. It is a cliche to say that they are our future, but educating children on these matters works. Way back in 1972, I had a teacher who, I see now, while a sufferer of anxiety, instilled in me the path towards this podcast. It all started with the wastefulness and pointlessness of coloured toilet paper. Yeah, such a thing did, and I assume may still exist. Simple changes seem to make the biggest differences. After all, white toilet paper, and even recycled whitish toilet paper, is much better for checking bowel health as well as planetary health. So little things in the minds of children can cause exponential change. So there we have a green manifesto and a set of steps to save the world. Let's aim high. To that end, a friend and colleague of mine, Rich Bowden, and myself are starting a new podcast and blog in the near future, The Real Food Chain. There's a link to our Facebook page in the show notes. Please have a look. The podcast will be interview-based, so keep your eyes and ears out for that one, and I will let you know when it launches. And that brings us to the end of this week's podcast. If you've liked what you've heard, could you please follow the link in the show notes and vote for World Organic News in the Australian Podcast Awards? Thanks in advance. Any suggestions, feedback or criticisms of the podcast or blog are most welcome. Email me at podcast@worldorganicnews.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back in our second year next week.